The picture was perfect. Sarah Miller, bathed in the soft afternoon light filtering through the large windows of Cedar Ridge Elementary's kindergarten classroom, knelt beside a small table. A circle of 5-year-olds, their faces alight with concentration, were carefully gluing brightly colored macaroni onto construction paper. Sarah's smile was warm, patient, utterly genuine in that moment. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a neat, practical ponytail, a few wisps escaping to frame her face. She wore the uniform of the beloved early childhood educator. Cheerful printed blouse, comfortable dark slacks, sensible flats. To the parents who dropped off and picked up their children, to her colleagues, to the wider Cedar Ridge community, Sarah embodied warmth, stability, and nurturing care. Cedar Ridge itself was the kind of affluent, tree-lined suburb where appearances mattered. Good schools, manicured lawns, late-model SUVs and driveways. Crime was something that happened elsewhere, reported on the evening news, not whispered about over backyard fences. People worked hard, played by the rules, and expected their neighbors to do the same. Sarah and her husband, David Miller, fit seamlessly into this landscape. They lived in a well-maintained, 4-bedroom colonial on Sycamore Lane. Not the largest house on the block, but certainly respectable. David was a mid-level financial analyst at a reputable firm downtown. He wore crisp suits, commuted diligently, and was known for a quiet, somewhat reserved competence. On the rare occasions they attended neighborhood barbecues or school fundraisers together, they presented a united front, polite, engaged, comfortably married. Sarah would laugh easily, chatting with the other moms, while David might stand slightly apart, nursing a beer, offering a nod, or a brief comment when addressed directly. It was interpreted as shyness, perhaps, or just the demeanor of a man focused on his career. Sarah's reputation at Cedar Ridge Elementary was stellar. Parents requested her classroom. Children adored her. She had a seemingly endless well of patience and creativity. The teacher who organized elaborate holiday plays remembered every child's birthday with a small handmade card and could calm the most distraught tantrum with a quiet word and a steady presence. Her classroom was a haven of colorful artwork, alphabet charts, and the comforting scent of crayons and Play-Doh. Colleagues describe her as dedicated, reliable, and unfailingly positive. Sarah? She's a rock, Principal Evans would say. The heart of our kindergarten team. Her social media presence, meticulously curated like so many in Cedar Ridge, reflected this idyllic life. Photos of beautifully arranged classroom activities, snapshots of cozy evenings at home, a glass of wine on the coffee table, a tastefully decorated mantle in the background, the occasional picture with David, usually at some obligatory social function, both smiling pleasantly for the camera. Captions spoke of gratitude, small joys, and the rewarding chaos of teaching. It was a narrative of contentment, of a life carefully constructed and seemingly achieved. But beneath this meticulously polished surface, tiny fissures existed, easily overlooked by those who only saw the facade. There was David's increasing absorption in his work. Late nights at the office became more frequent. Weekend emails intruded on what little family time they had. Conversations, when they happened, often revolve around logistics, bills, home repairs, schedules. The easy intimacy of their early years had gradually eroded, replaced by a polite distance. Sarah would try to engage him, asking about his day, sharing funny anecdotes from her classroom, but his responses were often monosyllabic or distracted. He seemed perpetually tired, preoccupied by pressures Sarah felt shut out from. Physical affection dwindled to a perfunctory peck on the cheek. Sarah found herself feeling lonely in her own home, a partner physically present but emotionally absent. Then there was the subtle tension around finances. David was the primary breadwinner, and while they were comfortable, Sarah sensed a quiet anxiety in him about money, a pressure to maintain their Cedar Ridge standard. Her teacher's salary, while respectable, was a fraction of his. She sometimes felt her contributions, both financial and emotional, were subtly undervalued, though David never explicitly criticized her career choice. It manifested in small ways. a slightly exasperated sigh when she mentioned wanting to replace the worn living room rug, a hesitation before agreeing to a weekend getaway she suggested. The unspoken message. His earnings were what truly sustained their life. Sarah coped by pouring herself even more deeply into her work. The unconditional affection of her students, the tangible results of her efforts in their progress, provided a validation and emotional connection that was missing at home. She became known as the teacher who stayed late, who organized extra clubs, who was always available for a parent conference. Her classroom wasn't just a job. It was an identity, a source of self-worth, and increasingly, an escape. The loneliness, however, persisted. It gnawed at her during quiet evenings when David was working late or scrolling silently on his phone. It was a quiet ache, a sense of being unseen, unappreciated in the very life she had helped build. She confided in her closest friend, Lisa Carson, another teacher at the school, about the growing distance. "He's just stressed, Sarah," Lisa would reassure her. "It's the job. He loves you. You guys have a great life." Sarah wanted to believe it. She did believe it most of the time. They did have a good life, a normal life, Cedar Ridge life. But the isolation within her marriage was real. She began to crave connection, excitement, a spark that had long since faded from her relationship with David. She started noticing more. The attentive father who lingered a little too long during drop-off, the friendly barista who remembered her coffee order with a warm smile, the easy charm of a dad volunteering at the school book fair. It wasn't about any one person yet. It was a dawning awareness of possibilities beyond the polite, predictable orbit of her marriage. A quiet yearning for something, someone, to make her feel truly alive again, to see her not just as Mrs. Miller, the perfect kindergarten teacher, but as Sarah. The facade remained impeccable. The classroom glowed. The house on Sycamore Lane looked peaceful in the twilight. Sarah smiled warmly at parents, exchanged pleasantries with neighbors, and maintained the image of the fulfilled wife and beloved teacher. But inside, a small, restless part of her had begun whispering that the picture-perfect life might not be enough. The cracks, though hairline thin and invisible to the outside world, were starting to form. The meticulously constructed image of Sarah Miller was about to face pressures it was never designed to withstand. The stage was set, not for a grand explosion, but for a slow, insidious unraveling that would ultimately lead to unthinkable violence, shattering the illusion of Cedar Ridge's perfect safety. The rain tapped against the kitchen window, like a persistent whisper, the kind that lingers just below the surface of conscious thought. Sarah sat at the island, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. The salmon she'd made for dinner, garlic and lemon, David's favorite, was now cold beneath its foil shroud. His text had come an hour ago, the same as always, working late. Big deal. Don't wait up. She used to leave the plate in the oven for him, the warmth slowly leaching away as midnight approached. These days, she didn't bother. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made her aware of her own breathing. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway, the occasional creak of the old colonial settling into its bones. She used to fill these silences with music, podcasts, the chatter of the TV, anything to drown out the absence. Now, she let the quiet press against her. She thought about calling Lisa, her closest friend at school. But Lisa would say the same thing she always did. "He's just stressed. Sarah, give him time." Lisa didn't understand that time wasn't the issue. Time had already stretched thin between them, like a rubber band pulled too far, losing its snap. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from Instagram. Someone had liked her classroom's fall crafts post. She swiped absently, scrolling past pictures of her students' grinning faces, their tiny hands clutching glue sticks and construction paper. Then, a direct message. "Hey Sarah, hope you're doing well. Just saw your post. Those pumpkin crafts look amazing. Lily still talks about you all the time. Anyway, was thinking, if you ever want to grab coffee and catch up, let me know. No pressure. Mark Reynolds, Lily's father, divorced. Always lingered a little too long at pickup last year. his smile a fraction too warm. Harmless, really. Just friendly. She stared at the message. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she typed back, "That's so sweet of you. I'd love that. Let me know when you're free." The reply came almost instantly. "How about tomorrow? For 30? Java House on 5th. She hesitated. Java House was downtown, far enough from Cedar Ridge that no one would recognize them. "Perfect," she wrote. The coffee was just an excuse, and they both knew it. Mark was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming mugs in front of him. He stood when he saw her, that same easy smile on his face. "You look great," he said, and the way he said it, like he meant it, like he'd actually noticed, made something flutter in her chest. They talked about Lily first, then school, then the weather. Safe topics. But the conversation kept drifting, like a boat slipping its moorings. He asked about her, not just the teacher, not just David's wife, but her. What she liked to read, where she wanted to travel, the last time she'd done something just because it made her happy. No one asked her things like that anymore. When his fingers brushed hers as he passed her a napkin, she didn't pull away. It didn't happen all at once. First, it was just coffee, then dinner, then drinks, then his hand on the small of her back as he guided her through a crowded bar, then his mouth on hers in the dim glow of his car's interior light, the rain streaking the windows like tears. She told herself it was just a moment of weakness, a lapse, a single fleeting mistake. But the next time she saw him, she didn't say no. David noticed the perfume first. "Since when do you wear vanilla?" he asked one morning, frowning as he leaned in to kiss her cheek. She stiffened. Mark had bought it for her, a small, silly gift. "One of the kids spilled scent on me during a craft," she lied. "It's probably stuck in my hair." David nodded, already turning away, already forgetting. But the lies piled up after that. Late meetings, traffic, a forgotten phone charger, a girl's night that never happened. She became someone else, a woman who could look her husband in the eye and spin stories with the ease of breathing. And then, just as she was beginning to think she could balance it all, the second man entered the picture. James Carter, the middle school gym teacher. Younger, bolder, dangerous. The first time James Carter kissed her wasn't gentle like Mark's had been. It was in the cramped supply closet behind the gymnasium after a district-wide staff meeting, his hands rough against her hips as he pushed her up against the shelves of basketballs and jump ropes. The smell of sweat and rubber filled her nose, and when his teeth grazed her bottom lip, she felt something dark and electric crackle through her veins. She should have stopped it. She didn't. James was everything David wasn't. Impulsive, physical, alive in a way that made her forget about lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences and the quiet, suffocating emptiness of her marriage. He texted her at odd hours, sent her photos that made her face flush, showed up unannounced at her classroom door with that reckless grin of his. "You're playing with fire," Lisa warned her one afternoon when James had lingered too long by Sarah's desk after school. Sarah just smiled and changed the subject. Robert Ellis was different. She met him in the school library during the annual book fair, where he was volunteering at the checkout table. A widower in his late 40s with kind eyes and a quiet voice, he'd handed her a copy of Charlotte's Web with a soft smile. "My wife used to read this to our daughter," he said. It was her favorite. There was something about the way he said it, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, aching fondness that made Sarah's chest tighten. Their first kiss happened 3 weeks later in his sunlit living room, surrounded by photos of his late wife. It was slow, tender, filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. When she pulled away, her cheeks wet with tears she hadn't realized she'd been holding back, he didn't ask for explanations. He just wiped her tears with his thumb and said, "It's okay to be lonely." By spring, Sarah was living 3 separate lives. Mornings were for David, quick, perfunctory kisses goodbye over coffee, the illusion of normalcy carefully maintained. Afternoons were for James, stolen moments in empty classrooms, breathless and urgent, the thrill of almost getting caught making her pulse race. Evenings were for Mark, dinners at out-of-the-way restaurants, his hand warm on her knee beneath the table, the way he made her laugh like no one else could. And sometimes, when the guilt became too much, she'd find herself at Robert's doorstep, where she could fall apart without judgment. She told herself she had it under control. She didn't. The first close call happened in April. Mark had texted her during dinner with David, "Thinking about you." And when David reached for her phone to check the weather, she nearly knocked over her wine glass, snatching it back. "Jesus, Sarah," David said, frowning. "What's so important?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just a parent complaining about homework." David stared at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then he went back to his food without another word. That night, for the first time in years, she felt him watching her as she got ready for bed. The digital clock on Sarah's nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. when she finally gave up on sleep. Beside her, David lay motionless, his breathing deep and even. She studied the sharp angle of his jaw in the dim light, the way his eyelashes cast faint shadows against his cheeks. He looked peaceful like this, so different from the tense, distracted man he'd become during daylight hours. She slipped out of bed carefully, avoiding the floorboard she knew would creak. The hardwood was cool beneath her bare feet as she padded downstairs to the kitchen. The house felt cavernous at this hour, every sound amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, the distant rumble of a passing car. Sarah poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, her mind racing. 3 men, 3 separate lives she was juggling. The weight of it should have crushed her, but instead, she felt strangely alive in a way she hadn't in years. Mark had texted earlier that evening. "Can't stop thinking about last night," and just seeing his name pop up on her screen had sent a thrill through her. James had left a hickey just below her collarbone that she'd had to cover with concealer before parent-teacher conferences. And Robert had asked her to stay the night, next weekend, something they'd never done before. Her phone buzzed on the counter, making her jump. A new email notification. She tapped the screen, expecting another school district update, but instead saw the subject line, "Your recent purchase." Her stomach dropped. She hadn't made any purchases. Opening the email, she saw the confirmation for a reservation at the Willows, a discreet boutique hotel 30 minutes from Cedar Ridge. The reservation was for tomorrow night under the name S. Miller. James. It had to be James. He'd mentioned surprising her, but she'd assumed he meant flowers or lingerie. Not this. Not something that would leave a paper trail. Sarah deleted the email immediately, then opened her messages. "Did you book us a room?" She typed to James. The response came almost instantly. "Surprise. Thought we could use some real privacy for once." "You're welcome." Winky face. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should tell him to cancel it. It was too risky, but the thought of an entire night together, without having to watch the clock or worry about being interrupted. "I'll figure it out," she finally replied. The next morning, Sarah stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear for a day of teaching followed by an evening of infidelity. She settled on a navy blue wrap dress, professional enough for school, easy enough to remove later. Going somewhere after work, David asked from the doorway, making her jump. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, already dressed for work in his usual button-down and slacks. His expression was neutral, but something in his eyes made her skin prickle. "Just a staff meeting," she lied smoothly. "Lisa and I might grab drinks after." David nodded slowly. "Right, the staff meeting." A beat of silence. "You're wearing the necklace I gave you for our anniversary," he observed. Sarah's hand flew to the delicate silver chain at her throat. She hadn't even realized she'd put it on. "Ah, yes. I wear it all the time." David's gaze lingered on her face for a moment too long before he pushed off the doorframe. "Have a good day," he said, his voice carefully neutral. As his footsteps retreated down the stairs, Sarah exhaled shakily. That had been too close. The school day passed in a blur. Sarah found herself distracted during circle time, mixing up the days of the week during calendar time, nearly calling one of her students by James's son's name. "You okay?" Lisa asked during their shared lunch period. "You seem off today." "Just tired," Sarah said, forcing a smile. Ethan was up with nightmares last night. The lie came easily now. Too easily. At 3:45 p.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Relief flooded through her. One less lie to tell. She texted James, "Still on for tonight?" His reply was immediate. "Hell yes. Rooms booked for 7. Can't wait to get you alone." Sarah's pulse quickened as she typed back, "See you then." She was just slipping her phone into her purse when another message came through, this time from Mark. "Any chance you're free tonight? I miss you." Sarah stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. She'd been seeing Mark for nearly 6 months now, and the guilt of juggling him along with James and Robert was starting to wear on her. "Can't tonight," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Parent conferences." The lie tasted bitter. Mark's response was almost immediate. "Liar." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Then another message. "Just kidding, winky face. Rain check?" She exhaled shakily and typed back, "Of course." Soon. The Willows was exactly the kind of place Sarah would have loved for a romantic getaway, if she'd been there with her husband. The room James had booked was all soft lighting and crisp white linens, with a bottle of champagne chilling in a bucket by the bed. "You're late," James said with a grin when she finally arrived at 7:20, pulling her into the room and kissing her before she could even respond. "Traffic," she murmured against his lips, already forgetting about the near miss with Mark's text, about David's strange behavior that morning, about everything except the way James's hands felt sliding up her thighs. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, champagne glasses empty on the nightstand, James traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "We should do this more often," he murmured. "A real date night." Sarah stiffened slightly. "You know we can't." "Why not?" James propped himself up on one elbow, his expression suddenly serious. "Sarah, this isn't just some fling for me. You know that, right?" The intensity in his eyes made her pulse race for entirely different reasons. "James, I'm falling for you," he said bluntly. "And I think you feel the same." Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again. The words hovered on her tongue. "I do," but saying them out loud would make this real in a way she wasn't ready for. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, saving her from having to respond. She reached for it automatically, then froze when she saw the name on the screen. David, calling her at 9:30 p.m. when he was supposedly working late. James saw her expression and frowned. "Problem? I have to take this," Sarah said, scrambling out of bed and grabbing her robe. She stepped into the bathroom and closed the door before answering. "Hello. Where are you?" David's voice was calm, too calm. "At Lisa's," Sarah said automatically, her heart pounding. "I told you." "No, you're not." The certainty in his voice sent a chill down her spine. "What?" "I called Lisa looking for you," David said, each word measured and precise. "She said she hasn't seen you since school let out." Sarah's mouth went dry. Come home." "Sarah," David interrupted. "Now." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her flushed cheeks, her kiss-swollen lips, the love bite James had left just above her breast peeking out from the robe. The walls of her carefully constructed world were starting to crack. The drive home from the Willows took 27 minutes. Sarah counted each one, her fingers tapping in erratic rhythm against the steering wheel. The radio played softly, some pop song about love and loss, but the lyrics blurred together in her ears. All she could hear was the echo of David's voice. "Come home. Now." She left James standing in the hotel room, his confusion turning to anger as she scrambled to dress. "You're just going to run back to him?" he demanded, blocking the doorway for a terrifying moment before stepping aside with a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Sarah hadn't bothered to explain. There was no explanation that would make sense of this. Now, as she turned onto Sycamore Lane, her stomach clenched at the sight of every light in their house blazing against the night. David never left lights on unnecessarily, another one of his small, money-conscious habits. The illuminated windows looked like accusation. She parked in the driveway, taking a moment to check her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her lipstick was gone, her hair mussed from James's fingers. She smoothed it down as best she could, wiped under her eyes where her mascara had smudged, and took a deep breath before stepping out into the cool night air. The front door was unlocked. Another anomaly. David sat at the kitchen island, a glass of bourbon in front of him, a drink Sarah had only seen him consume at company holiday parties. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the faint scars on his forearms from a childhood bike accident she'd kissed better countless times. "You're late," he said without looking up. Sarah set her purse down carefully, her pulse throbbing in her throat. "David, I can explain." "Don't." He finally lifted his gaze, and what Sarah saw there made the words die in her mouth. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, a cold, calculating clarity. "Just tell me one thing. Is there someone else?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. She'd prepared for accusations, for shouting, for tears. Not this quiet interrogation. She opened her mouth, closed it. The lies she'd perfected over months suddenly felt flimsy as tissue paper. David nodded slowly, as if she'd answered. He took a sip of his drink, the ice clinking against the glass. "How long?" Sarah's hands trembled. She clasped them together to still them. "It's not what you think. That's not an answer." "A few months," she whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. David's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a door closing, a lock turning. "Who is he?" Sarah hesitated. Giving a name would make it real in a way she couldn't take back. "Does it matter?" David's laugh was short, humorless. "I suppose not." He finished his drink in one swallow and stood. "I'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight." As he walked past her, Sarah reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his arm. "David, please." He flinched away from her touch, as if burned. "Don't," he said softly. "Just don't." Then he was gone, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Sarah stood frozen in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud in her ears. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? For David to notice her, to see her. Now that he had, she wasn't sure she could bear it. The next morning, David was gone before Sarah woke. A note on the counter read, simply, "Working late again." No kiss, no love you, none of the usual morning rituals. Just those 3 words, the letters pressed so hard into the paper they nearly tore through. School that day was torture. Sarah mixed up lesson plans, called students by the wrong names, dropped a stack of papers she'd spent hours grading. "You look like hell," Lisa observed at lunch, nudging a coffee toward her. "Rough night." Sarah forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." Lisa studied her for a long moment, then lowered her voice. "Is it David? Did something happen?" The concern in her friend's eyes nearly undid her. Sarah opened her mouth, to confess, to break down, to finally tell someone the truth, when her phone buzzed with a text. "Mark, can we talk? It's important." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Not now. Not today." Lisa's gaze flicked to the phone, then back to Sarah's face. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Sarah said too quickly, tucking the phone away. "Just a parent." The lie tasted like ash. David didn't come home that night, or the next. By the 3rd day, Sarah's anxiety had morphed into something sharper, more primal. She called his office. "Mr. Miller is in meetings all day." Texted him, "We need to talk." Even drove by his building, but his parking spot was empty. It wasn't until Friday evening, as she was pouring herself a much-needed glass of wine, that she noticed it. David's laptop, open on the kitchen counter, screen glowing. He never left his laptop open, never left it unattended. Sarah glanced around, as if expecting him to materialize, then slowly approached. The screen showed a single document, a list of dates and times, neatly organized in columns. Her breath caught. Asterisk October 12th. Leaves school 4:15 p.m. Doesn't arrive home until 7:30. Says staff meeting. No meeting scheduled. Asterisk. Asterisk NOV 3rd. Credit card charge at the Willows Hotel. $189. Room 214. Asterisk. Asterisk NOV 17th. Text from Mark. Last night was amazing. Asterisk. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled down, the list growing longer, more detailed. Photos of her car parked outside unfamiliar houses. Screenshots of text messages she'd deleted. Even a grainy security camera still of her and James entering the Willows. David hadn't just suspected. He'd known, and he'd been documenting every lie. A noise from the hallway made Sarah jump. She turned just as David stepped into the kitchen, his expression unreadable. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked quietly. Sarah's mouth went dry. David, Save it. He closed the laptop with a snap. We'll talk when I'm ready. Not before. Then he was gone again, leaving Sarah standing alone in the kitchen with her untouched wine and the dawning realization that the man she'd married was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The rain started just past midnight, a sudden, violent downpour that rattled the windows of the Colonial on Sycamore Lane. Sarah sat at the kitchen island, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, watching water cascade down the glass in twisting rivulets. 3 days had passed since she'd discovered David's files. 3 days of silence, of tiptoeing around each other, of sleeping in separate rooms with the bedroom door locked. The house smelled like bleach. David had spent the afternoon cleaning, scrubbing baseboards, mopping floors, wiping down surfaces with a methodical intensity that set Sarah's teeth on edge. When she'd asked why, he'd simply said, "Spring cleaning," without looking up from the grout he was scouring. Her phone buzzed against the marble countertop. "James, again. You can't keep ignoring me. We need to talk." Sarah turned the phone face down. She hadn't responded to any of them. Not James's increasingly angry messages, not Mark's concerned voicemails, not Robert's gentle check-ins. The web she'd woven had become a noose, and every thread she pulled only tightened it around her neck. A floorboard creaked upstairs. David was still awake. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. She needed air, needed to think. She grabbed her raincoat from the hook by the door and stepped out onto the porch, the damp wind immediately whipping her hair across her face. The neighborhood was dark, the streetlights casting wavering reflections in the growing puddles. Cedar Ridge slept peacefully, oblivious to the unraveling happening in house number 214. She didn't hear David approach. Going somewhere, Sarah whirled around. David stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the foyer light. He held something in his right hand, a manila envelope, fat with papers. "I just needed some air," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. David stepped onto the porch, letting the door swing shut behind him. The envelope tapped against his thigh as he moved. "I think we're past that, don't you?" Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "Past what?" Pretending. He held up the envelope. "I know everything, Sarah. Mark Reynolds, James Carter, Robert Ellis. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The names landed like blows. Sarah's breath came short and fast. "David, please." "Please what?" His voice remained eerily calm, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Please understand? Please forgive you? Did you ever think about that before you spread your legs for half of Cedar Ridge?" The vulgarity shocked her. David never spoke like that. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "Then what was it like?" He took a step closer, the rain plastering his shirt to his shoulders. "Was it the money? Mark's trust fund? James's, what, stamina? Or Robert? Was he just convenient because he's as pathetic as you are?" Sarah flinched. "Stop it. Or what?" David laughed, a hollow, terrible sound. "You'll leave me? You already did, Sarah. You just forgot to tell me." He thrust the envelope at her. Inside were printouts, emails, text messages, hotel receipts, even grainy photos of her entering and leaving various locations. The sheer volume of evidence turned her stomach. "How long?" she asked numbly. "Long enough." David's eyes glittered in the dim light. "I hired someone after the perfume incident. Best $5,000 I ever spent." Sarah's knees threatened to buckle. All those months of careful lies, and he'd known. He'd always known. "What do you want?" she asked. David tilted his head, considering. "At first, I wanted you to hurt like I did. Then I realized you already do. That's why you did this, isn't it? Because you're empty inside. Because nothing is ever enough for you." The accuracy of the observation cut deeper than any insult. Sarah's vision blurred. "So what now?" she asked. "Now." David smiled. A slow, chilling expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Now you go inside and pack a bag. You're leaving." Sarah blinked. "What?" "You heard me." He opened the door, gesturing toward the stairs. "Take whatever fits in one suitcase. The rest stays, including your wedding ring." The finality in his voice sent panic coursing through her. "David, we can talk about this. We're done talking." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Move." Sarah stumbled as he pushed her toward the stairs. The house seemed to tilt around her, the familiar surroundings suddenly foreign and threatening. Upstairs, David stood in the bedroom doorway as she numbly pulled a suitcase from the closet. Faster, he snapped when she hesitated over his sweater. Sarah's hands shook as she folded clothes, her mind racing. Where'd she go? Lisa's? A hotel? Would David really throw her out like this, with no warning, no discussion? The answer came when she zipped the suitcase and turned to find David holding out a single sheet of paper. Sign this. Sarah scanned the document. A hastily drawn-up separation agreement giving David full ownership of the house, their joint accounts, everything. At the bottom, a line for her signature. I'm not signing this, she said, pushing the paper away. Not without a lawyer. David's expression darkened. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. You'll sign it, or I'll send copies of everything in that envelope to Cedar Ridge Elementary. To your parents. To everyone who thinks you're perfect, little Sarah Miller. The threat hung between them, ugly and undeniable. Sarah's stomach churned. Her teaching license, her reputation, the life she'd built, all gone in an instant if he followed through. You wouldn't, she whispered. David leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. Try me. Something inside Sarah snapped. She yanked her arm free, the sudden movement sending David stumbling back. No, she said, her voice stronger now. I won't be bullied by you. If you want to destroy me, fine. But I'm not signing away my life because you. The slap came out of nowhere, a stinging blow that snapped her head to the side. Sarah staggered, her hand flying her cheek. David looked as shocked as she felt. They stood frozen, the only sound their ragged breathing and the relentless drum of rain against the roof. Then something in David's face changed. His shock melted into something darker, more primal. He took a step forward. Sarah reacted on instinct. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy crystal vase from the dresser, and swung. The impact made a sickening thud. David's eyes went wide for a split second before his knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, blood already welling from a gash above his temple. Sarah dropped the vase, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Oh God, David? David! He didn't move. A thin trickle of blood seeped onto the cream-colored carpet, spreading in a slow, relentless stain. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 3 a.m. Sarah Miller stood over her husband's body, the rain pounding against the windows like 100 accusing fingers, and realized with terrifying clarity that there was no going back. Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She crouched beside David's motionless form, her fingers hovering over his neck. A weak pulse fluttered beneath his skin. Relief flooded through her. He wasn't dead. Not yet. Blood soaked into the carpet fibers, blooming like some grotesque flower. The crystal vase lay shattered nearby, glinting in the dim bedroom light. Think. She had to think. Sarah stumbled into the en-suite bathroom, grabbing towels. The blood kept coming as she pressed them to David's head wound. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The clock on the nightstand ticked loudly. 3:17 a.m. She needed an ambulance. But calling 911 meant questions. Police reports. A hospital would notice defensive wounds, the unnatural angle of the injury. Her gaze fell on the manila envelope. Sarah lunged for it, dumping the contents onto the bed. Photos of her with Mark at the coffee shop. Printouts of text exchanges with James. A receipt from Willows with her forged signature. All the proof David needed to ruin her. A groan came from the floor. Sarah froze. David's fingers twitched. She watched in horror as his eyelids struggled to lift. Time slowed. She could call for help, face the consequences. Or the fireplace poker in the corner caught her eye. The first patrol car arrived at 6:42 a.m. Sarah had rehearsed the story a dozen times. I came home from an early morning walk and found him like this. Must have been a break-in. She'd even smashed the back window with a rock to sell the burglary angle. But Detective Maria Vargas saw through it immediately. Interesting, Vargas murmured, circling the master bedroom in her sensible flats. The detective's sharp eyes missed nothing. The blood spatter pattern on the wall, the hastily rearranged furniture, the way Sarah's distraught act slipped whenever she thought no one was looking. Sarah twisted a tissue in her hands. I don't understand who would do this. Vargas picked up the manila envelope from the nightstand. What's this? My husband's work papers, Sarah said too quickly. The detective slid out a photo. Sarah laughing with Mark at Java House, his hand on her knee. Work-related? Sarah's throat closed up. Downstairs, an evidence tech bagged the fireplace poker. Another photographed the broken window from the inside. Vargas's radio crackled. We got something in the trash, cans out back, an officer reported. Towels with blood that don't match the victim's wound pattern. The detective's gaze locked onto Sarah's pristine manicure. No scratches, no bruises, no signs of struggle. Mrs. Miller, Vargas said softly, why don't you tell me what really happened last night? Outside, the crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze as Cedar Ridge woke up to its first murder in 14 years. Sarah sat in the stark interrogation room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The metal chair dug in her back, but she refused to slouch. Posture was important. Appearance was important. Detective Vargas slid a tablet across the table. Take a look. The screen showed security footage from a neighbor's Ring camera. Timestamp, 2:58 a.m. A clear shot of Sarah's car pulling into the driveway, hours before she claimed to have discovered David's body. Sarah's polished nails tapped the table. That must be a mistake. Vargas swiped to the next image. A close-up of the fireplace poker, its handle wiped clean, but its tip flecked with microscopic tissue. Funny thing, the blood spatter suggests he was struck from behind while kneeling. Doesn't match your surprise burglar theory. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at the two-way mirror, imagining the prosecutors and forensic experts watching from the other side. The detective leaned in. Here's what I think happened. You came home after seeing your lover. Which one? Sarah snapped before she could stop herself. A slow smile spread across Vargas's face. So you admit there were multiple? Sarah's lawyer, a harried-looking public defender, finally spoke up. My client has nothing further to say. But the damage was done. As they led Sarah out, she caught a glimpse of the evidence board in the hallway. Photos of her 3 lovers pinned beside crime scene images. Phone records showing frantic calls to James in the pre-dawn hours. And worst of all, David's meticulous journal documenting her affairs, right up to his final entry. If anything happens to me, look at Sarah first. The perfect teacher, the perfect wife, the perfect suspect. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. Sarah sat perfectly still at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap, as the jury filed in after 8 hours of deliberation. She wore a navy blue dress, conservative, respectable, the kind of outfit Cedar Ridge expected from its favorite kindergarten teacher. The foreperson stood. On the count of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Behind Sarah, Mark lowered his head. James stared blankly ahead. Robert wiped his eyes. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. As bailiffs led her away, Sarah finally turned to look at the packed courtroom, at the parents who trusted her with their children, the colleagues who'd called her a friend, the 3 men who'd loved her. Their faces blurred together into a sea of pity and betrayal. Then she saw him. In the back row, half hidden in shadow, David's brother Ethan watched with cold satisfaction. The resemblance was uncanny. Same sharp jawline, same intense gaze. Sarah's breath caught, because in that moment, she understood. The journal entries, the private investigator, the way David had wanted her to find that envelope. This had never been about reconciliation. It had been about punishment. And as the heavy doors of the courtroom closed behind her, Sarah Miller realized, too late, that David had won. Cedar Ridge Elementary renamed their Teacher of the Year award. The house on Sycamore Lane sold to a young couple who replaced the bloodstained carpet. And in the prison visitation room, Sarah's only regular visitor was a grief counselor writing a book about the case. No one ever noticed the single red rose delivered to her cell every anniversary of David's death, or the card that simply read, "Checkmate."